Hello, I'm Annie Davey. I've been telling Bible stories to children for many years, and I've got some lovely ones to tell you from the New Testament in this section here. If you want to know about the background, where I got some of the background detail from, you can look it up on the web on truthortradition.com or www.korky.info, where we've written a book called Jesus, Faith and Fact. So it's all in there somewhere, but there's some interesting things here which you may not know. You may think you do know the stories, but wait and see. So let's see what we've got. Hello. I wonder if you like going on bees. Let's have a look at what this funny word up here says. Do you like going on a picnic? In nice weather it's good, isn't it? Providing there aren't too many ants or wasps and that sort of thing around. But this story is about a big picnic. And it starts way back in the town where Jesus had been absolutely surrounded by crowds of people who'd heard that he was there. Now, why would they come to see him? Well, not only did he tell them wonderful stories about how much God loved them, but he healed their sick people. And in a time when there weren't hospitals and doctors and nurses like we have, it was incredibly important to people that somebody might be able to heal their sick people. So of course they brought them all, and there were lots and lots and lots of people everywhere all the time, and it was very tiring. I put in supposed to be lots and lots of crowds of people here along the bank here, and they all crowded into the town, and they were all desperate to see Jesus. Hundreds of them, literally hundreds. And then he had some very, very bad news. He'd got a lovely cousin called John. We call him John the Baptist. And John was just a few months older than Jesus. And they'd known each other as boys and probably played together when they were younger. And John was a wonderful man of God. And he'd prepared the way for Jesus. And Jesus had the news that John had been killed by Herod. So he felt really sad. And he felt, I've just got to get away for a bit. So he said to the disciples, come on guys, let's just get in the boat and go across the lake, get a bit of peace and quiet. So they got in the boat. There were lots of boats on Galilee, weren't there? And whether they sailed, I don't know, but there's 13 of them in there if you count up. And they sailed right across the lake until they got to the other side. But some of the people had seen them leave and they thought, oh, I know where he's going. And so they set off too. And by the time Jesus got there, sailing quite slowly in the boat, let's see what's there waiting for him. There were hundreds of people there. Let's give them some heads, hadn't we? Lots and lots and lots of people. In fact, if I put more heads in the background, you'll see that there were even more. In fact, there were thousands of them. And Jesus didn't look at them and think, oh no, my peace and quiet. He looked at them and he felt so sorry for them. He said they're like sheep without a shepherd. They don't know what they're doing. They need somebody to look after them. So he taught them and he healed them and he looked after them. And as the day went on, the disciples said to him, well, you should send them home now, Lord. They need to go back to the villages or somewhere. We're miles from anywhere here. They haven't got anything to eat. And Jesus said to them, will you give them something? And they said, oh, come on. 8 months' wages wouldn't pay for enough bread for all these people. There's thousands of them. So Jesus said, well, what have you got? So they said, well, there's a lad here and he's got 5 loaves, little barley loaves and 2 fish. Well, that's not going to go far among this lot. And Jesus said, well, bring them to me then. And so he lifted up the bread to heaven and he said, thank you, Father, for what you're going to do. Please bless this bread and these dear people. Amen. And then he began to break up the bread and give the bits to the disciples. And he said, just give out to the people, make them sit down on the grass. So they all sat down on the grass. And it said there were 5,000 men, doesn't mention the women and children. And they were all hungry. And as the disciples began to give out the bread, it lasted and lasted and lasted until everybody had had some bread. And then Jesus did the same with the fish. And he gave them they broke off pieces of fish and gave it to everybody there. And they all had enough to eat. Now, it is a miracle. Nobody knows how this happened, but it was quite extraordinary. And in a way, I've seen a small version of this happen in my own life, where one day I had 5 big strapping lads from Trinity College come to work with my husband Corky to go down to tell people about Jesus in Broadmead in the city centre. And I thought they'd have had their lunch. And there were 6 of us round our table, me and Corky, a little baby girl called Anne, who was, no, it wasn't Anne, it was Rosie, who was about 9 months or a year old, I think, and her sister Sally, who was about 3, and her 2 older sisters, Ella and Anne. And I'd made enough kedgeree, which is rice and fish and egg, just enough for the 6 of us. And here were these big 5 lads come. I thought, oh my goodness, what shall I do? No, I've got to feed them. So we sat them down at the kitchen table, and I put plates in front of everybody and the baby on my knee, thinking, well, if I just give everybody a small spoonful and they have some bread and butter with it, that'll be fine, keep them going. But when it got to my plate, I didn't have no food left in the bowl. There was enough for a big spoonful there for me as well, and I know I didn't cook that much. So I just said, well, thank you so much, Lord. It's amazing. And they all had enough to eat, much to my amazement, and they went off down to Broadmead to do their talking to Jesus, talking to people about Jesus. And I just cleared up but I've never forgotten it. It happened a long time ago now. But in a way, in my mind, it was like that picnic that Jesus organised. And Jesus' disciples were so struck with that story, they never forgot it. Another time he fed 4,000 people, but this time, this one, it's in Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, the 4 Gospels. All of them have written it down. And it's all pretty much the same about how Jesus thanked the Lord for the food and shared it among all those thousands of people. It was quite amazing. And then they went back in the boat and left the people to go home. But they couldn't get away that easily. And when they got back the next day, there were more people, even more again. And they said, come on, do it again. He said, the trouble is, he said, you're coming to me because you want bread to eat, food. And he said, that's not what I'm here for. And they were thinking back to Moses, who'd prayed and God had provided manna, which was a sort of bread in the wilderness, years ago for 40 years. And Jesus had only done this big picnic once. They were expecting some more bread. But he said, that's not what I'm here for. I didn't come to give you food like that. I came to tell you about something really special, something even more important than that. But he said, God knows about what you need. He feeds the birds of the air. He knows what you need and he will look after you. This is what he said, which had them thinking. Shall we read it together? Jesus said, I am the bread of life. And it's, in a way, it can be translated the bread of the living or the living bread. He wanted them to have food for their souls, their hearts and minds, not just for their bodies. And that's why he was so keen to teach them about how much God loved them and that God had a plan for each one of them and he would care for them. And all through my life, I've noticed that God has taken care of us in the most extraordinary ways. And I have friends I could introduce you to who have amazing stories about the miracles that they've seen in their own lives. And years ago, when we got married, which was 1965, I knew that Corky wanted to be a vicar. And he wanted to spend his life teaching people about Jesus. And so we came to Trinity College in Bristol and he did 3 years there. And then it turned out he didn't go into the church after all. He joined up with people who's using the big sketchboards called open air campaigners. And privately we said to God, we would like to give you 2 years to see how this goes. And the 2 years turned into 38 years. And in all that time, we didn't have a regular salary. We just prayed, Lord, you know what we need. We know that you're going to look after us. And every year, at the end of the year, our income matched our outgoings. It was extraordinary. Just because people knew what we were doing and liked what we were doing, I don't know what it was. But God had prompted them to send us money when we needed it, or even a box of food on the front doorstep from time to time. It was an extraordinary way to live. But the Lord blessed us, and he's still blessing us day by day now, even though we're old and retired. So this thing about being the bread of life is actually true. And I would love to be able to explain it to you better. But it's one of those stories, you'll find lots more in Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. So have a look yourself and see what you can find out. So everybody had enough to eat, 5,000 people, 5,000 men and all the women and children. It was amazing. And, you know, people can be a bit untidy, can't they? But they didn't have paper wrappers and things in those days. But nowadays, people have to go round after big picnics like Glastonbury and festivals and clear up tons of rubbish, don't they? Awful. But even so, Jesus said to his disciples, right, take the fishing baskets. Well, he didn't say that, but that's, I imagine, where they got the baskets from the boat. And just pick up any scraps that you can find. So guess how many baskets they filled up? They filled up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 baskets of fish, of scraps, bits of bread and bits of fish that the people hadn't eaten. It must have been absolutely amazing. And if you think about it, there were 12 disciples and 12 baskets of bits of bread, of scraps, so they could have some to take back with their families. Very practical, and no mess left behind. So that's what happened. I think that's a brilliant bit of the story. So we must always remember to clear up, mustn't we, and not waste anything. Don't waste food. Always eat up what we've got on our plates if we can. So there we go. 12 baskets left over. Amazing. Should fit them all in, isn't it? There they all are. That was quite a load back to take back with him, wasn't it? So thank you for listening, and God bless you.